Welcome, everyone, to the Orange County Sewer District #1 Advisory Committee. Today is September 19th. It is 2:06, and I call to order the meeting. A copy of the agenda for this meeting may be found on the county website under the tab for the legislature. Please silence your phones and electronic devices. At this time, I ask you all to please rise and join the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kelly, could you do the roll call?
Yes, Amo.
Here.
Benelli. Present. Genie.
Here.
Ellers.
Here.
Patel. Dewey.
Here.
Five present, one absent.
All right, we're all here, with the exception of Lori Tortel. So we'll go right into item number 1. We have Rich Golden, the county attorney, Joe Mahoney, senior assistant county attorney, Eric Denenga, commissioner, Department of Public Works, Robert Gray, Department Commissioner, EF&S, Mary Beth Bianconi, partner, Delaware Engineering, and Tracy Levy, Delaware Engineering. Come on down.
Stars up at the table.
That's good. Yeah, come on up.
I'm just waiting to see if the seats are available.
In
Front, I'll be taking it. Oh, I have to take the second row?
We got a special.
We always have. You wanted
second row, you ended up front and center.
Yeah, it's just the way it worked out.
Okay, item 1A on the agenda is the variance resubmission. We're also, it all ties into the item B, the facility plan, and C, the draft and environmental impact statement. And if you could start us off, Mary Beth, with current status.
Sure. For the variance. So we have our luminary with us here today. So that's Tracy. She has a handout for everybody. So we have really good news. We have, after a fairly long process to get a complete resubmission finished. It was submitted a week ago yesterday. Yes.
Everybody get settled. Okay, sorry. Mary Beth.
The variance, response to the notice of incomplete application was submitted to the DEC a week ago Monday. So that's a major hurdle, that we have achieved. What Tracy handed out is the, letter of transmittal of that.
It's going on your.
It went last Monday. I'm sorry, yeah, there was a lot going on. I apologize.
I'm sorry.
So last Monday, it was submitted. It is just over 1,000 pages long.
1,292, I believe.
That's more than just over.
So, if anyone, the folks, here are our staff, they have access to this as a downloadable file. If anyone would like to have a copy of it, we can send you the downloadable file. It's so enormous, it can't be emailed. But what you have in the letter of transmittal is a summary of the responsiveness to the notice of incomplete application. And just for everybody to kind of take a tiny step backwards, what we're doing here, this is a variance from water quality standards for total dissolved solids and chlorides for the current permit for the current wastewater treatment plant. We have a 6 MGD wastewater treatment plant that has a speedies permit that was issued in March of 2020. That requires compliance with the water quality standard for these two constituents. And we have, there's a number of different methods to achieve that compliance. We've talked here at this table at length about physical construction of infrastructure and operation of infrastructure to comply is excessively costly and very damaging to the environment from an energy use perspective and other aspects of that. So the decision was made that the method of compliance with that aspect of the speedies permit would be to seek a variance from the water quality standards. Well, remember that it was in February of 2021, I believe, that we submitted the variance application. We submitted that application acknowledging at the time of our submission that probably would be deemed incomplete. And that was okay, because as we've discussed many times, right now in New York State, there is a pre-existing variance for mercury for all wastewater treatment plants statewide. So asking for a variance from the water quality standard for the Harrison wastewater treatment plant would be new ground to be covered by the DEC. There's a process in law that we're following to request that variance, but we acknowledge that the DEC would have questions, and we didn't want to put ourselves in the position of trying to guess what those questions or what the nature of that information that they would want would be. So we submitted a substantively complete application, but acknowledging that it probably needed more backup information.
Just to underscore that a little bit, what Mary Beth is talking about is that the same problem that we're having with complying with our speeds permit is the same problem many other municipalities have or will have in complying. And so DEC knows this. So when they look at our request for a variance, not just looking at our request for a variance, they're considering it in the larger context of how will this impact all these other municipalities and other entities that have speeds permits. And so it's a much bigger issue requiring a much deeper dive and insight on their part.
Just as a follow-up to that, Rick, do you guys feel that by them looking at this as a much larger issue across the state, that could potentially hold up the process for not us, but everyone else, because it would be precedent setting?
Well, I think as Mary Beth is saying, it is going to hold up the process of it because they're looking at it in much more detail and understanding the consequences of this. But I think that because of the same reasons, it would be harder for them to just sort of say no to us, because that would have the same kind of consequence to everybody else, and they would have to look at each of these others. I think they're looking, and that's why I believe Mary Beth brought this up. The analogy with mercury is it's the same type of thing happened, is that they could have had an entity by entity review of everybody's systems and mercury standards, but they went and said, let's look at this in a more holistic way, and you're going to go ahead and generally have this variance with respect to mercury. Is that accurate?
Right, exactly. So our response, if folks may remember, we received a notice of incomplete application, which again, we anticipated. What we were hoping that the Department of Environmental Conservation would do would be narrow their list of requirements from us, which they did. You may recall they requested documentary information, which we gathered. We spent a lot of time taking, I believe, Tracy, well over 300 water quality samples. They requested that laboratory data and information, and then there were a number of other aspects of the application that needed to be bolstered with additional information. So we prepared and submitted a response to the notice of incomplete application. DEC has acknowledged that they did receive that documentation. We have offered to set up a virtual meeting with them to walk through the documentation, because it is over 1,000 pages long, to really just give them sort of an overview, not necessarily at this early stage expecting them to have any particular questions or comments, but we have volunteered that. They have not responded to that offer yet, but we fully anticipate that they will respond to us. And we just want to prepare everyone, they may very well ask for additional information, because as Rick has pointed out, this has broad implications. And they need to back up their decision-making process with very robust information. It's to be expected. We don't want them to very offhandedly provide a response. We want them to think very carefully and deeply about this and do their analysis and base their decision-making in facts.
Mary Beth, part of the reason that they are going to take such a deliberate review is that they're answering to the EPA on this very issue.
Sure. Yes. Absolutely. So I don't know if Tracy's here. I don't know if you want to give them a big picture, not super detailed, just what's in the response.
As Mary Beth said, there's those three main pieces that we chose. That TDS, total dissolved solids, is background in geology. That's a natural phenomenon here. Chloride is the other aspect, which
all across the northeastern United States and some places in the Midwest in that snow belt. Chloride has been increasing in the environment since development happened. People build roads, they build parking lots, they build sidewalks. There's lots more road salt application and other things, water softeners, things that people do on the landscape. And the data that I dug up basically supports that. Early 1900s, TDS levels are here, chloride levels are here. And then as the thruway goes through and development happens, chloride goes up. The difficulty I think DEC is going to have with this is that TDS is not one element. It's a mixture of anything dissolved in that water quality sample that comes through a filter. Dry that in an oven. That's your measurement of TDS. You don't know what that is just looking at it. You need to be working with what's the makeup there. It looks like chloride is one of the major components here. So that, to Rick's point, comes across to where many other municipalities are looking at similar issues, dissolved solids and chlorides. Those are the two chemistry pieces, and then the third was the social and economic impact on a larger scale. If this one wastewater treatment plant needs to treat for that total dissolved solids and chloride in their treatment plant. So what we did was respond to the NOIA in terms of getting the sampling done with the quality assurance project plan, which will help let the DEC use the data that the Harriman wastewater treatment folks have collected in the future for further either TMDLs or further variance decisions. Some of the things that they asked were for reorganizing the way we were talking about it, TDS and chloride separately. You can't do that entirely, but things like that I tried to answer. More information about the population, more information about, in general. So that's been answered. I did supply them with a response to each NOI point by point saying that's in this section, that's in this section, that's in this section.
Economic data?
Yeah.
And economic impact analysis. We spent actually quite a bit of time in recent month or so on that economic impact analysis.
And with the estimates that we have available based on what Orange County does currently in terms of charges for users in the actual SD District 1. That's where we had more data.
And that showed, right? So that showed that
Yeah.
if we implemented a treatment solution.
If we used an our reverse osmosis system, then the impact would be substantial to overwhelming. What was the term? I forget the term. Substantial to very great within the OCSD1 district in terms of the economic impact. And then putting together the fact that there would probably be at least 27 tanker trucks traveling from here to a disposal facility for the discharge water from that reverse osmosis treatment plant, and the carbon emissions and the cost of all of that together is tied up into that as well. So those are the three prongs that we're looking at: natural background in geology, chloride due to human activity, and high cost.
So the RO obviously just, the environmental impact would just.
It's got a larger impact than it might be resolving.
So-
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. It's always all permit making when you read about it is about balancing, right? There is no perfect solution. You're always balancing. And when we treat water, yes, we're ending up with clean water in the end, but we're using chemicals and we're putting a lot of equipment into play, and there's a lot of disposables and a lot of consumables. And the big thing is using an enormous amount of energy to do it. So it's always a balance, right? It's a balancing between the impacts of all of that and the impacts of clean water. So that's the argument that is being made to issue. When we look at what the standards are for issuing a variance, it is asking you to provide the different weights on that balancing, comparing meeting the strict limit of 500 milligrams per liter for TDS and 250 for chlorides versus all of the impacts that you would have: social, demographic, environmental, fiscal, all of these things. Are the conditions actually out of your control? Such that even if we cleaned it up over at the end of the pipe, we're still gonna have this condition existing out in the environment because, as Tracy pointed out, it's in the geology. We're not doing anything to change that. And it's caused by simply, urbanization, the actions of people that are indirect, but that are causing a problem. So that's kind of where we stand with the
One more.
variance, yes.
So one more that you should probably be aware of is the requirement to contact the Orange County and Rockland County Health
Oh,
Departments
yes. Mhm.
on their concerns, if they have information or concerns about wells that may be drawing water that's impacted by the Ramapo River downstream from the discharger. Orange County has no wells known to them that are downstream of this discharge that are weedy or groundwater under the direct influence of surface water. But they did provide a look at where their concerns would be in terms of drinking water. The things that we found were the constituents of TDS. And the thing that showed up mostly was the nitrate,
Mhm.
which is a regular wastewater effluent parameter anyway. Rockland County has more concerns, being that there's several wells downstream from here, quite a ways downstream, I would add, that are perhaps influenced by surface water. There's a showing of direct similarities between the surface water and the groundwater at the well fields there, but they have no information on exactly how much and how far and when. And their major concern is chloride, and they did admit that chloride is a problem. And they're having well issues in other places as well due to high chlorides. But their concern is they really think the Ramapo River should be protected in order to help mitigate that whole problem. So there are concerns, they're documented. We contacted them, we got written responses, and that's part of the variance as well.
They're also almost helping make our argument by saying they have a pre-existing chloride problem in their wells already. You know, it's not, again, we're back to that, it's part of the condition.
Okay, I'm gonna see if there's any board members that have questions. Legislator Raymond?
Just one, maybe, we're in the era of sports betting and handicapping. We watch football games. What do you guys think? If I look at the past performance of other health departments, other environmental departments, what's the line on getting this thing over the hurdle, making it happen? What do you think?
So as we said, the only other one that exists is for Mercury. So,
Smash it.
it's New York State. New York State, right. There's other states are,
Probably some smaller ones around for more obvious
There-
local things.
there are, but they're more based on, they're not based on variance, or based on like best available technology or water, site-specific water quality. So, what I will say is that, we've had a lot, and a bunch of people around this table have had numerous interactions with the DEC in the course of the last many years on this project, many years. We have had, certainly had our differences of opinion about, you know, kind of what the situations are and how to manage this situation. One thing that we do get very clearly from the DEC is that they recognize that we have the situation that we have. We have a deeply urbanized area here in Eastern Orange County. There is not a situation going forward where someone's going to show up and say, all right, everyone stop flushing your toilet, taking showers. That's not realistic. It is not going to happen. There's also an acknowledgement on the part of the DEC that this is a high growth area and that we are a home rule state and that local land use decisions are in the hands of local officials. So while we have this Orange County Sewer District that has the authority over the sewer pipes and the things in Orange County Sewer District number 1, things like land use decisions that control the location, intensity, and nature of land use are not in the purview of this county. That's just not how it works here in New York State. It's in the towns and the villages and the cities. So there is an acknowledgement that that is the current set of circumstances. There also, in the questions that we have, there's an acknowledgement that there is this broader issue happening, as Peter points out, across the region, if not the whole of the northeastern United States, with respect to total solids and chlorides. This is not a unique situation to Orange County. We've talked about before about how there are issues in Dutchess County, really up and down, particularly concentrated here in the lower Hudson Valley because of the geology. But it's really a broad problem, and DEC has acknowledged that as well. So many of their acknowledgements indicate that they understand the complexities of compliance and that compliance comes in many ways. Compliance isn't necessarily building something at the end of a pipe. So we're not going to take bets on this, but what we can say is that the speedies permits are UPA permits under New York State, the Uniform Procedures Act. DC does have a timeline within which they should respond to us. Now, at the end of the day, are we gonna get a full response? But they've been waiting for this submission for some time. They have the staff prepared. We would like to think that in a relatively quick period of time, let's say 30 to 45 days, we will have a response back from DEC. We can't, guarantee that, but they're aware of how important this issue is, how much urgency there is behind this issue. So, we have reasons to think that this submission will be well received, and that we're working very hard to understand it and to get to the point they can make a decision.
In a non-gambler's nomenclature, or lawyer's nomenclature, I'll go out a little bit on that limb. And I think, given all of the context that Mary Beth has given, I think it's more likely than not that it will be granted in the end. There may be other things that they are asked for. They may put some conditions on the variance if they grant it. But I think, given everything, my analysis is that it's more likely than not we will get it. But that's all it is.
No, to go with you, I think, I heard that from Rick in the beginning, is to say no then opens up how many other municipalities are gonna be running before that with more work. And if there's a way to come up with a middle ground that'll work for everybody, they're gonna want to find that. And that's I'm hearing you say that. That's great, because I think it's important for us to realize, and I'm asking the question not in a humorous way, but say, as a legislature, if it looks like this ain't gonna happen, we have to think of plan B or Z. We have to think about it, because it's what it is. It may be the $200 million piece that has to do with the reverse osmosis. We have to do it because they're going to turn us down. We don't want to hear that, but let's not be naive that it's not a possibility if we think that. That's what I'm because we can't wait for them for 2, 3 months, 6 months, and then go back to ground zero and start. How do we do it on our own?
Another thing that I think is informative in this process is to know that, so DEC, obviously in New York State, has primacy to issue speedies permits. So speedies permit is the state pollutant discharge elimination system permit. It falls under the NIPDES, the federal NIPDES program, which is a national pollutant discharge elimination system permit. Its goal and objective in the world is that water bodies are classified by their highest and best use. When folks like us want to discharge water into those water bodies, it needs to be treated to a point where it doesn't have cause a negative decline in water quality. Fundamentally, that's what the whole program is about. Interestingly, in New York State, the DEC is also the agency with primacy over the withdrawal of water from the environment. So DEC is the one who also, not only did they issue the discharge permits, we're going to put the water into the stream, they are also the agency that issues the permits for people to draw water out of either the ground or a stream for any purpose, drinking, sending it off for non-contact cooling, golf course watering, you name it. So the same agency that is saying, okay, we've got this end of pipe problem, is also the agency that's over here responsible for where the source of contamination came from in the first place. So it puts them in a very interesting situation. Because when we go back, and I think when Tracy was here some time ago, she talked a little bit about why is TDS and chloride regulated in the first place. It has to do with with chloride, it's at 250 milligrams per liter. Historically, that's when people could actually start to taste sodium, salt, and that they might not want to drink water, and that could cause people to drink less water, which would cause dehydration, which would cause medical issues. So there's this human health kind of, which may or may not be good science at this point in time, but that's what the basis was. So we go back to my point about the DEC are the ones who allow the people to take the water out of the ground to drink it. But we're going to worry about when it comes out the end of the pipe. There's a little bit of it's backwards, right? You should be concerned about if TDS and chloride at these levels are important for human health. That should be an issue on the taking the water out of the ground and serving the people's side, less than on and now it's coming out of the pipe after it's been through all the houses and all the showers and everybody, and that kind of thing. So that's one of the reasons why, again, DEC needs to have a very full and robust, submission to really backstop their.
Well, these, clearly a systems theory issue. So many components of the system that play into this.
Okay.
wouldn't we all like to be a fly on the wall in those closed door meetings? There'd be some screaming going on, I would imagine.
Well, I think what you're gonna find, and we find this with a lot of, we actually, on the way over here, we were just talking about, we're doing a brook floater mussel, right?
Survey.
For survey, a brook floater mussel survey over in Sullivan County for a wastewater treatment plant expansion. Because the brook floater mussels might be where we already discharge wastewater,
But they're now considered threatened or endangered.
but yesterday they
depending on how you
were,
look at
but
them.
today they are, right?
20
so-
years ago.
Right, so this is one of those, so when we have those meetings, and we've been having like staff meeting with DEC, you get, to your point, so you have the biology, ecology people who are like, oh, my hair is on fire. You have the sort of, the wastewater side of the fence going, this isn't that, you've been doing this for, when was the plant built, 72? Yeah, you've been doing this for 50 years. If they're there, right? They've figured it out somehow, right? Magically, right? So it's an interesting sort of thing, because you're right, DC is in their little divisions. So we'll see.
Then you have the political,
Then there's the political. So,
where's the next election?
We have another question from legislator.
Sorry,
Cheney?
thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
So could you go into a little bit about the dynamic between DEC and EPA relative to this whole decision? Because it doesn't rest solely with DEC, as I understand it.
correct, right. So with any species permit that is issued that's over 1 million gallons, so which is considered an EPA major permit, when DEC prepares the draft permit, and this is going to be, that was one of the issues of things we addressed in this notice of incomplete application. DEC had to determine like what is the regulatory mechanism they will use if they approve this to make it enforceable. So they determined that it would be a modification to the species permit. So we had to actually prepare a whole new species permit application and all of the things that go along with that, even though we're already sitting here operating our plant, doing all our things. All new sampling, new paperwork for everybody to fill out and sign. When they prepare that draft permit, they send it to DEC, to EPA. That is when EPA will comment, because the draft permit will say, to your point, and here's what we're considering granting, what relief we're considering granting, here are the conditions of that relief. Like one condition I would fully expect if they grant us a variance is we're gonna say, you have to continue to do things to reduce the amount of TDS and chloride in water. You're not gonna get this variance and then just walk away and do nothing. You're going to be required to continue to the extent that you are legally capable of doing it to try to reduce the amount of TDS and chloride in your water. You're not building an RO system, but maybe you're going to the water suppliers and saying, hey, can you soften your water before it gets to the residences so that we have one big water softener instead of thousands of water softeners, right? So those kinds of things. So then EPA comments on that draft.
That's the structure of the multiple discharge variance for mercury as well, because mercury is already above water quality standards in the streams due to atmospheric deposition. Wastewater treatment plants are a small piece of that overall mercury in the environment, but there's still a mercury minimization plan, which Orange County has one as well, and that's keeping mercury out of your wastewater treatment plant, making sure you follow up with your dental amalgam collectors, making sure you keep schools from putting, mercury containing chemicals or whatever from their experiments into the water and things like that. So it's really a similar
Similar thing.
idea. You can only do what you can do.
So, and I know we haven't been the fly on the wall in the meetings, but what's your sense of ongoing discussions that have occurred over the last 3 or 4 or 5 years between DEC and EPA? And do you see that some of the things that DEC has been asking for are hopefully going to make EPA comfortable with whatever the decision is?
Yeah, we know, so the EPA has monthly meetings with each DEC region to kind of go over all of the issues that they have in their regions, and then they have quarterly meetings with the main office at DEC to talk about these kinds of issues. So we're aware, we have another project over on the other side of the river, and we know that EPA and DEC have been discussing this issue of TDS and chloride naturally occurring in the environment that's above the water quality standard. And that's been ongoing for some time. It's an industrial discharger, and that's been ongoing for some time. They're adding a lot, so they're gonna have to reduce theirs. but that's a pre-existing condition, so they're aware of this situation.
With 30 to 45 days, there are a number of responses that can come from PEC at the end of that time.
We're thinking
what
it's
are
gonna
they?
be another notice of incomplete applications, give us more stuff. Because again, they are working to build up the background of information on which they're going to make their decision.
Now, after 1,292 pages of resubmission, would it be fair to say that if they send back a notice of incompletion, that would start narrowing down the
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, that's what we would anticipate. Now will be very specific things that they have, we would assume, and we've done this before, particularly with industrial speedies permits. A lot of them are negotiated because there's just sort of the practical realities of what you can actually do in an industrial condition. So it would be now, they're thinking specifically about, okay, if we need to put this condition, what information do we need to backstop that condition? Or if we want to put a limitation, what is the information that supports that limitation? And so you're right, it's going to be this funneling effect. So we would not think it's another extensive round of sampling. It's not going to be more permanent applications. We did all of that. Frankly, they may ask some more information about the demographic and economic impacts of this, because that's a pretty significant part of this, is how expensive it is. They may ask for some more analysis, although we don't really know what form it would take in terms of things like greenhouse gas impact from actually operating one of these facilities. They're substantial. And we did some estimating, but we didn't want to presume that we knew what they would be looking for to that, because then it's, again, it's that sort of, so if an environmental group pops up and says, well, wait a minute, you're putting this thing that you've already determined is not good in the environment, that's got to be bad. Well, one of the counterbalance arguments is, yes, but how many tons of carbon do you want released to the environment, because we're using power to operate this to reduce a few pounds of this in the environment. Like, there's a balance. So that's the kind of thing.
Okay. Katie, anything? No? What? All right, if there's no other questions, I think if we could try to tie in the resubmission to what the next steps are to the facility plan and the draft environmental impact study is how we can move along now.
So for the facility plan, we had a conference call a couple of weeks ago with staff where we focused in very specifically on changes, modifications, and information that we need to include in the facility plan. I had intended to work on that last week, but I was out for a family matter. So that is well in hand. We anticipate having that documentation finished by the end of this month. And then we are trying to target, because now we will have all of the parts. Our target date for a draft environmental impact statement back to the county is October 11th. That's our target. We are very hopeful that we will make that target.
Okay, well, let's, like you said earlier, this certainly was a great time since we have the resubmission. And now it seems that that's kind of helping to move the other two next steps. What I would ask you is if, now we have public comment periods coming up, and as we approach the new year, sounds like we're getting this wrapped up. But if the next meeting, if you could try to look at a timeline, we've done that in the past, and then it's held until reasons beyond our control.
Yeah.
Where it went off track. So now if we could get a new timeline and kind of take us in the next year. With it keeping in mind that these things are, now that these are approaching completion, then what's our next look? Okay.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Do you have anything else, or other legislators? Anything else? Any other concerns, or? No?
This was
Mary
very
Beth?
good, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for this, to getting us to this place and time and date today. It's been a long time coming, and I appreciate everyone's help. And I know the last little bit really came together. The team huddled up, and everybody got it done. So really great job on everybody's part, and I thank you. So with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Just-
Oh, Rick, yes, sorry.
Mary Beth, with respect to the DEIS, would we be proceeding under the assumption that we would say in DEIS that we anticipate that the variance would be granted, and therefore these are the impacts the variance is going to be granted, and then if the DEC comes back with something other than a condition, yes, or whatever, we would then study whatever those conditions would be.
Right, so it's a little tricky, right? So the variance is for the existing species. The EIS studies a to-be-issued species for a larger project, including a variance.
Yeah.
So the EIS, the project study in the EIS is expand the Harriman wastewater treatment plant from 6 to 9 MGD, secure a variance for TDS and chloride, and upgrade the lower, I'm gonna use the pejorative word, the lower interceptor, but it's a little more complicated than that. The main artery into the wastewater treatment plant to deliver flow to the wastewater treatment plant. So the EIS is studying a variance, but for a 9 MGD plant.
No, I just,
So yes, we would, any comments that we get, and that's one of the reasons we've tried to kind of tie these things together, because in a perfect world, when we get to the end of EIS for that larger plant, we've now set the whole table so that when we do that application for speedies for a 9 MGD plant with a variance, DEC just goes, okay, we got all the stuff. We're not going through this whole process all over again. We're not, that folks who've been here sort of from the beginning will remember that that was one of the challenges we had early on with deciding what to do with respect to expanding. Because the question was, if we're going to expand on site at Harriman, and we, at the time, the speedies permit, March 2020 permit had not been issued, but we had a draft permit with the TDS chloride limit in that we knew we could not meet under any circumstances without spending a fortune. So the question was, how do you go forward as a legislature with any degree of confidence, making a decision about expanding on site if there's this, maybe we're not going to get a variance. So there were two reasons to apply for the variance for the existing permit. One was the permit says we have to comply. So we either have to design something and build it or get a variance. That's pretty binary, right? There's not a lot of options there. So we had to do it anyway. But it also was submitted, and we were very transparent with DEC in saying, this is the forerunner to another speedies permit with an application for variance for the exact same site, but for a bigger plant. Because we know that's where we need to go. We looked at all these other options, right? We looked at going to the Hudson River. It was really, really expensive and really, really complicated. We looked at a plant on the Moodna. We looked at those two, just those two. We looked at, a long time ago, we looked at connecting to the Goshen plant, because they had lots and lots of capacity, right? And they don't anymore, because God bless them, lots of economic development. But that was part of the thought process, so absolutely agree.
and again, the next step, and Mary Beth will outline this in her timeline, but the next step for the legislature is just to make a very low threshold determination that it's ready to be put out to the public. It's not making a decision on the DEIS at all. We're just saying that it's ready for the public and other government agencies to look at it.
Then we'll take it to Legislator Cheney's Fiscal Services. And then on to the legislature. Yes, Chairman.
Just before we leave, and this was obviously a very positive meeting, and I thank you for that. So how does this position us as far as the different rounds of funding that are available? Where are we with that, and
Great
are we
question.
any closer?
Yeah, so, and I believe some of you received an email from Mr. Sexton, which was really appreciated. And I believe I had sent you guys an email before he did, actually. So you may remember, I think it was at our last meeting or maybe before the last, we talked about we were going to list this project on the Clean Water State Revolving Fund intended use plan for financing for federal fiscal year 2024. Say that 3 times fast. So federal fiscal year 2024 starts on October 1st. The intended use plan, IUP, is, every state in the nation has one of these. Congress appropriates money to the states to pay for wastewater projects. And then each state who receives that funding has to say what they intend to do with the money. So that literally intended use plan means, what are you gonna do with my money? It is a published document. If you cannot sleep tonight, you can look it up. It is on the Environmental Facilities Corporation website. And it is, you go funding programs, clean water, and then you go intended use plan, draft 2024. If you do that and you scroll through the many, many, many pages of that document, you come to a list at the bottom of the document that is everybody, every municipality across the state that wants money from the program. Some of them are already getting money from the program. Some of them are in the middle of a project. Some of them are closing out a project. Some of them are just thinking about doing a project, and some of them are like us, where we spend a lot of time figuring something out. Our project is listed in something called Category B, which is for communities that have a population served of greater than 3,001 persons and less than 1 million. So that's us. We scored 82 points. It is competitive. There is also scoring criteria that you can find in that document that tell you how you got the points. There is a funding line that they basically take they take all of the money that they have, they divide it among the various categories that they have to spend money in. And then they literally start with the project with the highest score and say, this project needs $10 million. They take $10 million and subtract it, and they keep going. So they run out of money. At 82 points on Category B list, this project is extremely well positioned to secure financing going forward. If you further dive into this list, you're going to see that this project is actually 2 projects. It is divided up. They both have the same project identifier number, but one of them is project 00 and one of them is project 01. Project 00 is the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, and project 01 is the collection system. It's making the lower interceptor and its dear friends larger. That process of how we got to there, we submitted the whole project, 200 and something odd $1 million. The Environmental Facilities Corp reached out and said, wow, this is an enormous project. Can we talk about this? So we set up a conference call with Eric, with the folks at EFC, and we talked about how do we practically make this project go forward. Their concern, frankly, was that, remember I mentioned they have all these categories. There's an A, which is little tiny communities, B is like medium-sized. New York City gets its own category. There's something called Category D, which are communities that have shown proven deep economic need. So that's Category D. They can be large communities, they can be tiny ones, anybody. It's just about economic need. There's a couple of others that have to do with environmental programs that the state runs. They take all their money and they divide it out. For Category B, if we listed a $200 million project, and we just also happen to have another project that is a $500,000 project, it's also a Category B project. If those 2 projects that we listed, which both qualified and scored really, really well, were permitted to be listed as we submitted them, we would use all of the money for the whole state, for every community over 3,000 people, all of it. So I said, well, that's not gonna work. We have to be fair, right? So they said, well, what can we do? How can we work our way through this? And we said, well, right now where we stand is we've done a tremendous amount of work in terms of preliminary design. As you guys know, remember we came with all the boards and all that stuff for the treatment plant. But the collection system, that needs more engineering work. So that's going to be like a second phase, right? So why don't we divide the project? So you'll see two numbers. One of them, I believe, is 156 million, and the other one is 49 million. The 156 million is the upgrade of the Harriman wastewater treatment plant. That includes making it go from 6 to 9, comply with SPEED's permit, no RO, so that includes the variance. It also includes a very, very, very healthy contingency of 35% on top of our numbers. That's one of the reasons why it's such a big number. The state is requiring everyone to use a 35% contingency because of price escalation. So you'll see that. So that project is will be considered eligible for funding in the funding cycle that is next spring. In order for us to get in the game on that, and we talked about this, and this will show up in the schedule that we'll put together, we need to finish EIS. And then we need to go through the County Law 5A process, which is the process, and I think you guys have been through this before, in anticipation of borrowing money, bonding. So we need to go through that process and get that all finished out before we apply. Next summer, I believe it's June 15th or 16th is the due date for applications for funding. So that's where we are there. Good news is in working with the state, with Eric earlier on in the ramp up to this, they suggested, and this was their suggestion, which was a great thing, let's set up recurring phone call. So you just got a
Yeah,
calendar
we know.
invitation. So we had this recurring phone call with the funding agency so that they can kind of track along with us and we make sure we're all on the same page, we're not missing any steps, everything is being done. So our next call with them is mid-November.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find.
So we're
the-
on track.
Mid-November, so we are on track.
I just have one last
Thank you.
follow-up because we have another meeting coming in at 3. And then there are other sources of funding and things available. So if we got
Right, so
Plan
this is
B, 10 million.
Yeah, so this is
there's
sort of
other
our-
ways to
sort
keep
of-
chipping away at it.
sort of the gateway, right?
Yeah, okay.
Getting through this program is the gateway, but when we apply through the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, we're also applying at the same time for bipartisan infrastructure law, which is up to 25 million in grants. We will also at the same time apply for the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act funding, which is up to $5 million. We'll do water quality improvement. We'll end up doing a whole bunch of them all at one time. All, provided, the big key here is we have to get through that county law 5A process in order to do any of these. They want you to have gotten that legal process finished in order for, you can apply, but they're just gonna send you back and say, you haven't done this process, you're not eligible.
Thank you guys so much. Anybody else have anything quick before we end? Okay. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn, please. Michael Amo. Second, Gary Cheney. Okay, thank you, everyone. Meeting adjourned.
Good job.
Good. I'm trying to find that date. I went